This happened like 2 weeks ago. I'm still not fully over it, but I need to get it out there because keeping it to myself is driving me insane. My name is Mike, but everyone calls me Mikey. I'm 22, and I'm still living with my parents in Northern California. And before you ask, no, it's not the California you're picturing. I always have to explain this to people. Not every part of the state is beaches and palm trees. Where I live, it snows pretty heavily. We're talking middle of nowhere, surrounded by forest, closest neighbor is a 10-minute drive kind of situation. I've been skiing my whole life, so the cold doesn't bother me. If anything, I prefer it, but that's not really the point. The point is that 2 weekends ago, my parents flew out of the country for a wedding. Some friend of my mom's was getting married in Portugal, and I wasn't invited, but I didn't really care about that. A weekend alone in the house sounded kind of nice. Our house isn't anything special, just your standard 3-bedroom, 1-story, nothing fancy. My parents' room is at one end of the hall, mine is at the other, and there's a guest room in between that we mostly use for storage. The living room and kitchen are in the middle of the house, and the front door opens right into the living room. I'm describing this because it'll be important later. The first night alone was fine. I went to bed around 2 a.m. and passed out pretty quickly. The second night is when everything went wrong. I went to bed around the same time, maybe a little earlier. I remember being more tired than usual, so I knocked out fast. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was the middle of the night. That's pretty irregular for me. I knew something woke me up because I always have to keep my phone on airplane mode when I sleep. So it wasn't that, but I had no idea what it could have been. I scanned the room, but it was pitch black. As my eyes started adjusting to the darkness though, I saw something strange. My closet door was wide open. I always keep that door closed, always. It's one of those sliding doors that doesn't stay shut on its own, so I make a point of closing it every night before bed. I know that sounds weird, but I've had to think about open closet doors since I was a little kid. The point is, I didn't leave it open. I know I didn't. I started freaking out a little. My brain was doing that thing where it's trying to convince you that you're still dreaming, but I knew I wasn't. I was fully awake. I could feel my heart starting to pound, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really, really wrong. Without thinking, I reached over to my nightstand, grabbed my phone, and turned the flashlight on. I literally screamed when I saw them. There were 2 figures standing at the edge of my bed, just standing there. Before I could make out any features, they scattered in opposite directions like they were trying to avoid the light beam. It was freaky how fast they moved, almost like they knew I had been about to turn the light on. I started flailing my phone around, trying to keep it on them, but they were too quick. I heard something clatter to the floor, but I didn't have time to process it. I just started screaming. I don't even know what I was screaming. I think I was just making noise out of pure panic. The 2 figures bolted for my bedroom door. I heard their footsteps pounding down the hallway, and I started chasing them before I could have a second thought. By the time I got out of bed and made it to the hall though, I heard the front door slam. I ran to the living room, but they were already gone. I stood there in the living room for I don't even know how long. My hands were shaking, and I was just trying to focus on catching my breath. The moment I regained my composure, I ran back to my room, locked the door, and called 911. While I was waiting for the police in the safety of my locked room, I finally turned the light back on. That's when I looked down at the floor by the edge of my bed and saw what had clattered during the commotion. It was one of my mom's kitchen knives. I almost threw up. I'm not kidding. Those people had been standing over me with a knife while I was sleeping. If I hadn't woken up when I did, I don't even want to think about what would have happened. I probably wouldn't have woken up. The police showed up maybe 20 minutes later. They searched the entire property, but there was no sign of anyone, of course. They took my statement, asked me a bunch of questions, and then one of the officers told me I must have forgotten to lock the front door. I told him I remembered locking it, but he just kind of shrugged and said that was the only explanation, being as there were no signs of forced entry, and every other door and window throughout the entire house was locked. The only thing that even could have been unlocked was the front door. I accepted that and watched them leave, but I knew I locked the front door. Fast forward through the nonsense of my parents getting home the next day and scolding me all over again for forgetting to lock the front door. There's no need to get into that. It's been 2 weeks now, and I still don't have an explanation. Forget whether the door had been locked or not. Why the hell were 2 people in my room with a knife? Just robbed the place. It's not like I would have noticed them come and go. At first, I thought whoever broke into my house that night might have known my parents were out of the country, but now I'm starting to doubt that theory, because I have trouble believing standard thieves would go out of their way to kill someone.